can do that again. Unfortunately, now we've got this rather shoddy coalition with the Conservative Party propped up by the DUP at the cost of £100 million per vote.
Oh, magic money, please.
And we're seeing there just the gross inequalities taken even further. Here in Hastings, and the kind of problems we've got in Hastings, I mean, as leader of Hastings Council, we have to cope with a massive level of cuts here. We've had £30 million cut out of the council's budget since 2010, and we've lost £1.5 million or so just over the last year. The number of people employed by the council has gone down from 600 to 300, and with levels of cuts on that scale, frontline services start to suffer. It's not just in Hastings, that's happening right across the country. And of course it's not just councils, it's also the NHS, it's local police, it's the fire service, and we've seen recently with the kind of disasters, particularly Grenfell Tower, that those emergency services are so important to us. And we have to make sure those cuts are reversed. And instead of that, all we've got is £1 billion being paid to the DUP to spend how they want in Northern Ireland. And more cuts falling us down here in the southeast, where we've got some of the poorest and most deprived communities. People think of the southeast as being this wealthy area, but it isn't. Here in Hastings, we've got a neighbourhood here, one of our neighbourhoods here is the 13th most deprived in terms of income and employment deprivation in the entire country. That's out of 33,000 such neighbourhoods, far more deprived than anything in London, anything in Northern Ireland, indeed. We have those kind of conditions here in Hastings, and they are not being addressed. We have one ward in Hastings where, between the richer part and the poorer part, there is a 16-year difference in life expectancy. 16 years, just within one ward. Those kind of spectacular, gross and appalling inequalities cannot be allowed to continue. And the only way we can stop this is by getting a Labour government. I'm sure, the opportunity to do this very soon. I was very pleased to see the manifesto this time, and I think since I joined the Labour Party in 1980, it was the very first time that I could wholeheartedly go out and campaign on and support a Labour Party manifesto. The Labour Party is a collective movement, as all of you here, whether you're party members or not, are part of that. And that's what it's about. It's about that collectivity. It's about the many and not the few. And it's not about the culture and the personality. However, of course, we all need leaders. And I think that sort of brings me to the topic of our next speaker. We have got another speaker, actually, so don't go away at this point, now you've heard me. At this point, I think I will kind of wind up what I'm saying. Thank you all very much for coming. Don't forget St Leonard's Festival. And all I want to say now, really, is I want to introduce you to the country's next Prime Minister.
So much for being here, and thanks Pete for what he just said. I want to welcome a special friend, a special guest here today. Bill Stevens joined the Labour Party in 1945, the son of a suffragette, campaigning for socialism all his life. Thank you for being here today. Campaigned all his life for justice for all of us, and that's what the election campaign was about, and that's what the history of this town and this region is about. Louise was quite right to talk about the cultural history of Hastings and St Leonard's, the place where Mugsborough was invented, where the ragged-trousered philanthropist was written, where the whole idea of the injustice in society could be challenged, and the way in which those underpaid, grossly exploited building workers were actually philanthropists towards the richest within our society. Fast forward to those now working in call centres on 0 hours contracts, those people in insecure work, underpaid, while their employers make grotesque levels of profits at their expense. And so the injustice wasn't then, it was then and it is now in a different form. And that's what we're trying to put forward in the election campaign, and we put forward now. We didn't win the election, and for that I'm deeply sorry. But we did something quite amazing in that campaign. We put on more votes for the Labour Party in the election than at any time since 1945. And we gained a higher proportion of the vote in England than at any time, including 1997, for a very long time in our history. And we gained a large number of constituencies. And when we arrived in Parliament, there was one side sitting on the government benches who didn't look a bit happy. And there was a greatly expanded parliamentary Labour Party that looked very happy indeed. I am deeply sad we didn't quite take Hastings and Rye. But I want to say thank you to all of you for all the work you did in the campaign. Thank you for Pete for the way he led the campaign, the enthusiasm he put into it, and the inspiration of his leadership locally. And you know what? We might have to do it all again in the very near future. Hey! Are you up for that? So we've identified 73 constituencies in England, Wales and Scotland that we can win. And you know what? I'm going to go to every single one of them. We're going to take the campaign to the Tories because we are utterly determined that the message will get out there, the message of hope, the message that things can and will and must be done differently in this country. And so, when the Tories called this election, they thought it was going to be a walk in the park. The commentariat thought it was going to be a walk in the park. Almost every one of our daily newspapers wrote us off. And what happened? What happened? People joined in. People came together. People of all walks of life, of all ethnic backgrounds, of a very wide range of political views who were looking for decency, justice and unity within our society. And you know what? We do not indulge in personal abuse or personal attacks, because I haven't got the time or the patience to get involved in that kind of gutter politics. As far as I'm concerned, what I condemn this Tory government for and condemn their DUP allies for is what they've already done this week. We gave Parliament the opportunity in the first vote of this Parliament, the first vote after the government's programme had been published in the Queen's speech, of a vote to end the public sector pay cap. Since 2010, there's been a freeze on public sector wages. In reality, NHS workers have had a 14% pay cut during that period. Local government has been grotesquely cut, as has been explained in the case of Hastings. In general, it's 40% of most local authorities have had their income cut from central government. And you could draw a map of England and Wales and Scotland. You could mark out the poorest areas, and you could overlay it with a map of those that have had the biggest cuts. Do you know what? The biggest cuts would obliterate the vision of the poorest areas in this country. It's been selective, brutal, nasty and vile towards the poorest and most vulnerable people within our society. And so our offer to Parliament was quite simply to vote to end the public sector pay cap. Not complicated at all, would you think? And the same people who can't get get on the screens quick enough to praise the emergency services whenever there's a disaster, then voted to freeze their pay for yet another year. Well, I just hope people notice the double standards and the hypocrisy surrounding all of that. And then we had another vote on the Queen's speech, another vote which was essentially setting out a programme of investment, a programme in offering opportunities and hope for people, a programme of investment in education, in health and in housing, all the things that we campaigned for in the general election. And you know what? The DUP, in response to the billions that have been stuffed down their throats in order to get them to vote, voted with the Tory government. I just hope the working class communities in Northern Ireland recognise what is going on. Their deal with the Tory government has meant more of the pay cap. Their deal with the Tory government has meant more poverty in England, Wales and Scotland, and a sort of never-never land idea there's going to be more and more investment in Northern Ireland. I tell you this, a Labour government won't do shabby deals with anybody. We will put forward our programme, we'll put forward our vision, we'll put forward our principles and invite, yes, invite others to come along and support us in doing that. The election campaign put forward the case for ending austerity, put forward the case of why we should end austerity. I just ask you to think about it. Is it right that in Britain, the fifth richest country in the world, 4 million children are living in poverty?
No.
Is it right that 4 million people, not necessarily the same people, are also living in fuel poverty? Is it right that 1 million people every year, or 1 million uses take place of food banks around this country, including many people in work in the public sector? Even NHS nurses are accessing food banks in order to survive. What kind of moral principles are behind that you allow this degree of poverty to go on in one of the world's richest countries? And then we had the disaster, and it was a disaster, of Grenfell Tower. And I went to Grenfell Tower the day afterwards to talk to the emergency workers and the work they'd done. And there's no words you can find really to describe the brilliance and heroism of firefighters, paramedics, police and others that rushed into a burning building, particularly the firefighters, knowing full well they might die as a result of it. And many were advised not to go in because it was too dangerous. And I said, well, why do you do it? They said, because we're firefighters, because that's what we do, because that's what we signed up to do. Real heroes within our society. And then talking to the paramedics who were going in to identify charred bodies and try and bring them out, and the death toll rises and rises and rises. And what makes me so angry about Grenfell Tower is not one of those people need to or should have died. A wholly preventable accident, wholly preventable disaster that took place there. And surely that has got to be a wake-up call to the whole country, a wake-up call about the conditions in which people live, the danger in which those people were left to live, and the need to fund local authorities properly, because there's a price to be paid. When you cut local authority income, you end up with fewer planning inspectors, you end up with fewer people as building inspectors, you end up with fewer people working in the fire service, fewer paramedics, you end up with stretching and straining our public services to the umpteenth degree. So police, firefighters and paramedics that had been there at London Bridge dealing with that terrorist attack and that disaster at London Bridge were there again at Grenfell Tower. Who was missing was, of course, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, who didn't seem capable of doing very much at all. And so, in the public inquiry that's now going to be called, I've written to the Prime Minister yesterday saying we want it quick and urgent on the case of Grenfell Tower, and we want a longer, much longer, more detailed inquiry into housing conditions and stock all over the country. But it isn't just Grenfell Tower, there are issues over the whole of the country that have to be addressed. And we will make sure those issues are addressed. So surely, if ever there was a wake-up call, what happens in modern Britain, it's got to be that disaster of Grenfell Tower and the loss of life that went with it. But you know what? In response to that, people come out, communities come out and support each other. And so those that would seek to divide us, as they did in Manchester with that dreadful bomb that went off and killed so many, mainly young women, just exercising their right to go and enjoy themselves, or the terror attack that took place on London Bridge, or indeed the terror attack that took place in my own constituency in Finsbury Park less than 2 weeks ago. The response could be that you divide communities, could be you start a campaign of hate against people, or the much more powerful response is to come together in unity as communities.
Hey!
Communities respecting each other, communities recognising that diversity is a strength, not a weakness, communities coming together achieve far more than those that would seek to divide us and bring about hate within our society. And so our function, our role as an opposition in Parliament, hopefully a very short-lived opposition in Parliament, is going to be to challenge this government on its economic strategy, challenge this government on its inadequate response to all the crises that people are facing all over this country. And just quite bluntly say, we cannot tolerate this level of inequality within our society. It can't be right that there are homeless people sleeping rough increasingly on the streets of this country. It can't be right there's so many children living in poverty. It can't be right that so many children go to school where there's a supersized or oversized class. It can't be right that so many children go to school hungry and don't get enough to eat during the day because they can't afford it. So our manifesto did put forward something very different. It was about the transformation of society. And it wasn't just a shopping list of ideas, because we need a bit more than that. We have to recognise that the economic thinking that's dominated so much of Western economic thought for the past 20 or 30 years, that somehow or other you deregulate, increase the ideas of the power of the free market, and somehow or other there's either a trickle-down effect that helps the poorest in our society, or the growth of individualism means you buy your own education, buy your own healthcare, buy your own pension, sort out your own housing, and the rest of the people doesn't matter. No, instead we put forward something very different. At one level, it was a repeat of the old and very strong Labour traditions of the community coming together and the community providing. But it's also saying we've got to challenge the growing inequality in this country and across the world with the economic strategy that's been followed. And so we were saying, very modestly, 95% of the population would pay no more in tax, 5% would pay more in tax, corporations would pay more in tax, we would deal with the scandal of the tax havens around the world and the way profits made here are salted away in those tax havens. And in return, we would put forward a national investment bank that would invest in all parts of the country equally and fairly, that would put forward an investment idea which would promote high-tech industries and good quality skilled jobs for every young person, particularly, who are so often so exploited on 0 hours contracts and insecure work, and that we would deal with the infrastructure deficit that exists in so many parts of the country, including this very region itself. And that we would negotiate a Brexit with the European Union that would really protect the rights of all EU nationals to remain here and have full rights, and that there would be a tariff-free agreement with the European community, and there would be agreements on environmental protection, agreements on fish protection, and a partnership with Europe in the future. We recognise the results of the referendum, but I'm determined we have an intelligent partnership relationship with Europe in the future. That was what we put forward in the manifesto, and that is what we'll be doing in the future. But there are also the issues of the role of young people within our society and the security of older people in our society. Too many young people want to achieve in life. There's never too many who want to achieve, a lot want to achieve. They want good apprenticeships, they want good universities, they want good jobs, they want to be able to develop themselves, and they want to be able to contribute to the rest of our society. But you know what? If you're growing up in poverty, if you're not well fed, if you're in an oversized classroom in a primary school, if you didn't get a place in nursery, then as the years go on, your life chances get sliced away. Not when you're 16, 17 and 18, they get sliced away from the 2-year-old, the 3-year-old, the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old. And so I am utterly determined that we would invest in preschool and grant every child at least 30 hours a week free childcare for all children. And it would be not just childcare, it's play, it's coming together, it's social interaction, it's art, it's music, it's joy, it's children growing up in a collective community that is so important. And in primary school, every child getting a free school meal and every child getting to learn a musical instrument through our pull-out spring. So that gives children that sense of community and start in life. And we would probably fund both primary and secondary schools so head teachers wouldn't go through the indignity, and it is an indignity, of being told to raise some money from wherever you can get it to pay the staff you've got and to maintain the courses you've got. Head teachers should be concentrating on education, not on trying to raise money from somewhere else. But it's after school that the injustice and inequality becomes so bad, because those that go to university are now saddled with debts of £50,000 or £60,000 at the end of the university course. And you know what? The number of working class students applying to university is falling. The number of students dropping out after a year is rising. And the number of people graduating is likely to fall in the future. And that means there's a double loss. There's a loss for every one of those individuals that could have become a great engineer, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer. Many, many things they could have become are not going to become them because they couldn't countenance the idea of that level of debt. And we all lose out because we haven't got those skilled people working and contributing to our community in the future. And so it is about investment for all. And so I make no apology for putting forward that £11 billion commitment that we would fund university education for all those that get into university. Because it's an investment for the future. It's our support for our communities for the future. And this election campaign, if nothing else, exposed the meanness of the whole attitude and mentality within the Tory party over the question of social care. Listen, the NHS is precious, it's ours, and it's got to be free at the point of use, and it will always be free at the point of use with us. And we will also end the dicing up, slicing up and privatisation of our National Health Service. That the issues of underfunded mental health services, of insufficiency of social care have got to be addressed. There's more than 1 million waiting for social care. The Tory party's answer is to take away the homes of those that have got one in order to fund social care. Our view is we would immediately put money in to deal with the emergency in social care, but make it a responsibility through a national care service. Because it cannot be right as a lottery. If you have cancer, you get treated by the NHS. If you have dementia, you are expected to sell your house in order to be cared for. Well, dementia is a condition that can happen to anybody. People that have got it need support. We need, as a community, to support them. And those are the views that we're putting forward in our future. But what the future now holds is an opportunity for all, because what has been achieved by the way in which the Labour Party and our supporters have campaigned so hard and so well over the past 2 years is this. We've turned our backs on the idea that it's solely about economic management of the financial disaster of 2008-9. We've turned our backs on the idea that it's all just about management. What we've done is put forward the ideas that communities together with that creative imagination they have together, can achieve great things. Our manifesto, for the many, not the few, opened the eyes of a lot of people of how this country could be run, how different it could be, how much more equal it could be, and how much less waste of talent and opportunity and resources there would be if we gave people the chances and the opportunities. So be it on education, on health, on housing, or industrial investment, our manifesto put forward decent ideas for the future. We also put forward a view of the world and a view of our environment. Let's look at the dangers we face in the world, the dangers of environmental destruction, the dangers of huge ungoverned spaces such as in Libya, the product of some of the wars we've been involved in the past, and have a foreign policy and an international strategy that does recognise those dangers, does recognise the appalling lives that so many refugees face, and do something about it by a foreign policy based on peace, justice, democracy and human rights. And obviously being very well aware of the need to support our own safety and communities in the face of the attacks that we've put up with, because we don't want any more of that within our society. But we now have a job ahead of us. We don't know when the general election is going to come. We will put everything we can into campaigning for that general election. And we do it because of our past, because of our history. I was talking earlier about the son of a suffragette, those women who laid down their lives that women could get the vote in the First World War. Those people who suffered in the 19th century that there could be any extension of democracy within our society. Those who went through the horrors and indignities of the Great Depression of the 1930s and emerged at the end of the brutality of the Second World War to build a national health service, to build council housing, to build public ownership of industries and the security that went with it. And so, in a different century, in a different time, we learn from those that went before. We have the campaigning methods of before, such as this wonderful rally we've got here today in Warrior Square. But we also are able to bypass those media commentators who would never give us a hearing by the use of social media. Yay! Social media to get our message out. To get our message out of the kind of society and kind of country we could be. Where workers do get rights from day one in work. Where they're not charged when they want to go to an employment tribunal, but instead go there getting justice. Where people get legal aid when they go to court on the basis of need, not on the basis of their ability to fund themselves or not, as the case may be. There's so much in our manifesto that gives such hope and such opportunity to people. So I ask all of you here today in this wonderful rally, stay together, to work together, to campaign together. Stay together to win Hastings and Rye. Stay together to win a general election. Stay together to transform our society. Stay together to achieve what is possible in this world. And that is a sharing and protecting of the world's riches and resources, not the everlasting trip down the road to misery, which is the great gap between the richest and the poorest. It's wrong, it's immoral, it's unnecessary. Do you know what? We're changing things already. We've changed the nature of public debate. We've changed the nature of the value of debate within our society. Now on to the next leg of winning that election, the next leg in order to bring about that transformation. Can I say